The research I've read is all over the place with regard to consumer attitudes to paying for content. Literally 35 to 55 to 80%, depending on who they ask and when. Is there a source you think is particularly helpful, or on the other hand, a source that is often sketchy? Stay away from.
Sure. So, like I said, I think I respect Ryan Lawler on a lot of his research. I think he cuts through a lot of numbers. Another thing you can do on a lot of these surveys, sometimes you'll see who's underwriting the research. So, for instance, if you see somebody that's a telco equipment provider underwriting the research, the numbers are always going to be huge. This is going to be huge. You're going to need to buy a lot of telco gear because people are going to be watching a lot of movies. So those numbers will trend high. If you have a group that, for instance, is going to have to be paying writers royalties, all of a sudden they'll say, this market is nascent. This is so small. This is not a big opportunity. Don't negotiate to be included in the revenue sharing agreements. And all that research will come out on the low end. So kind of probably discount the high-end research and the low-end research and get rid of those two outliers. And then everything else will be pretty close, and you can kind of average the middle part of that to get the numbers you're going after. But once again, remember that in the pay-per-view market, for instance, in music, it's almost well over 50%, closing in on probably 80%, driven by iTunes. So, what percentage of that market share you're really going to get, rest away from Apple, it's unclear. So really what you're thinking about there is how much, if I'm going to get my content into iTunes, how much can I get inside that iTunes ecosystem? So, I don't know how relevant it actually is to see the overall big numbers. It's really about what market you're going after, what genre of content you're going after, what type of content you're going after, and then what ecosystems you're going to be involved in. And that'll give you a much truer number of where you're going to have as a potential market size.
Are there any companies out there that are trying to create a situation where they aggregate all the news, movies, TV shows, books, etc., and then offer everything to me on a subscription basis? Yeah. And what about selling content to them?
Sure. So that's the very definition, I think, of Comcast. And so Comcast does a great job of bringing together a lot of premium services. And so the hard part there is usually those type of models, consumers are very different, and the markets are getting very fragmented. So if my primary interest is in martial arts and Korean literature, I may not be that interested in the bundle that the MSO comes up with. And so I might be more attracted to an a la carte model where I can buy the UFC and some other things a la carte. So the criticism of those, what we kind of call walled garden models, is that you're basically, as a consumer, potentially kind of jettisoning some of your choice to somebody else to bring in all the different content for you. And they might do a really good job, and it might be apropos for 80% of the population, and that's great. But then there's always going to be the people that have niche interests or special interests that feel that, hey, I'm subsidizing all this other content that I don't care about, and they don't have a good representation of the content that I do care about. So when we talk about a la carte models and going after specific niche media, that's where we see a lot of models that are very good. So going back to the CSTV example of I can't get certain, Division III schools streaming on my TV at home through my MSO that's aggregated a lot of content for me. That's something that's really important to me. So I have to go out there and get that a la carte from the service provider. So that's one model. If you want to look more into that model, potentially you're an ISP or something, and you want somebody to bring a content bundle to you, Real Networks, who is used to be known a lot for their Real server, now has moved more and more into like a Real Pass model, which they bring together and aggregate a bunch of content. You can subscribe to Real Pass and get a bunch of content. Another example out there is the Cinecore. So Ron Burkle founded a company that does a nice aggregation model, and then they sell that aggregated set of content as an add-on to your ISP's plan. So if you get, for instance, your content through something like Adelphia, potentially you could get the Cinecore add-on, and that would give you, NASCAR and a bunch of other cool online properties that you could watch. So those are the type of models out there that do achieve what you're talking about.
Do you see any movement for Yahoo, MSN, or the other portals to add a subscription component?
Sure. So right now, I think those portals have enough traffic and enough audience. A lot of their focus and energy is around advertising, and that's a fantastic business model for them when they're at that level of scale. But all of them have experimented with pay-per-view. So you talk about Google, they have Google Checkout, and you see the formations there of some, lots of commerce opportunities with that product. So I imagine that, selling music and movies on there would potentially make sense. I think one thing that's been holding back a lot of third-party portals and things from selling music and movies online is a lot of the DRM issues and DRM requirements. So as we saw Amazon move to a stream-only model, and that take off and be successful, I think that's just something that's cross-platform that works really well for the consumer. So we could see a model there where other people may take the Amazon-type streaming model, that Netflix-type streaming model, and offer that up in a pay-per-view fashion.
One last note, which is that these webinars are being archived and they'll remain up and online for an indefinite period of time.
Great. Well, hey, thank you very much for your time today and getting just kind of a taste of what some of the topics we're going to cover in the future seminars around pay-per-view and subscription content. Really appreciate your time. And then, if you have additional questions that might come to mind later, keep sending the questions. We'll respond to them throughout the week. Thank you very much.